Welcome to the Weather Farm, where we give you the latest weather storms and information that has impacted the United States for the next 48 to 72 hours, and we will break it down region by region so you know exactly what is happening in your backyard. As we begin our day on our Friday morning into early afternoon, we are seeing an area of showers across parts of southeastern Kansas through Oklahoma, making their way into Missouri and Arkansas. We also see the remnants of those showers that moved off the Carolina coast earlier in the day on Friday. They're making their way out to the Atlantic. Across parts of Minnesota, we have light showers stretching into the UP of Michigan. We have an area of high pressure that is centered across parts of Colorado. We are also watching a low pressure system that's diving out of northern Canada that's going to make its way through Saskatchewan into Manitoba and bring some rainfall to Manitoba, and that's desperately needed for those areas that are impacted by the Canadian wildfires. As we go through the day, we're going to continue to watch those storms make their way through Missouri and into Arkansas. They're going to weaken slightly as they continue to move east, but through the heating of the day, by the time we get to the afternoon, we are seeing storms popping from West Virginia through Pennsylvania, through New York, into northern New England. We're also watching an area of storms beginning to fire across the upper plains. All of this is going to be dependent upon the daytime heating. This is 8 o'clock on our Friday evening. We're watching a line of storms making their way through northern Texas, out of Colorado, and into southeastern Wyoming, and we'll dive in a little bit closer on those as we get later in this video. And that remnant of that cluster, it's dying out as it makes its way through southern Illinois into Kentucky, and rain is lessening across northern New England. For our Friday, the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted areas of Colorado and Kansas for an enhanced risk of severe weather, as well as parts of New Mexico and Texas. When we look at the tornado threat for this, we have a 5% area from eastern Colorado through southwestern Kansas into the panhandle of Oklahoma and Texas into far eastern New Mexico. Wouldn't be surprised if this gets upgraded to a 10% chance of tornadoes on our Friday. We do believe that this is the area that will have the greatest chance of seeing tornadic activity. The bigger threat across most of this area is going to be the hail. And in fact, we now see 30% chances of hail in Colorado and Kansas down through New Mexico and Texas. In fact, this area is hatched, which means we could see softball-sized hail 2 inches or greater in diameter. And we saw plenty of that yesterday with those storms as they rolled through Texas. So this is going to be a hail area as well as a strong wind component with this system as it makes its way basically through the Tennessee Valley into the deep south. We're going to watch that as well. We do have a slight wind risk for these storms up in parts of Massachusetts. We'll have to watch if any of those storms do become severe. As we make our way to our Saturday, that slight risk does shift across most of the deep south through the Tennessee Valley, stretching back into Texas, with the marginal risks basically stretching from New Mexico all the way to the East Coast. And as we look at our Sunday, we are back into Texas with that enhanced risk. Now, it does not include the Dallas metro area as of now, but we will continue to watch this. But we do have 2 areas of slight risk that we will continue to watch for our Sunday. And as we make our way into Monday and the start of a new work week, that 15% chance of severe weather now extends to parts of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. And what's really driving this is our jet stream. We have the jet stream with these strong southwesterly flows out of the Rockies across the plains into the Ohio Valley. And we expect that pattern to continue with pulses of energy riding the jet stream almost every 18 to 24 hours. So if you're getting storms today, you're likely to get some scattered storms tomorrow, Sunday, into Monday as well. This pattern is going to persist throughout the weekend, and basically it's anywhere east of the Rockies. It doesn't matter if you're in North Dakota, Texas, or up in Maine. You're going to see that constant storms over the next 48 to 72 hours. And so we're going to watch that as we go through the weekend and we get into next week. Here's that low pressure system that I mentioned. It's diving out of northern Canada. It's going to impact the upper plains by the time we get to our Sunday morning, and it's going to change the weather pattern, and a slight trough is going to dig across the eastern part of the United States, mainly the Great Lakes and the upper Ohio Valley. As we get to our Monday, that's going to cool temperatures here slightly. We have strong ridging beginning to build out west and warming temperatures for the beginning of next week. And that pattern is going to continue. We see that trough continuing by our Wednesday to still be centered over the eastern part of the United States, impacting the Great Lakes into the northeast. That ridging starts to build out across the plains. And as we move towards Father's Day, we're going to see a strong area of ridging across the central plains and across most of the United States for that matter, the exception being the Pacific Northwest. That's going to provide really warm temperatures as we enter that Father's Day weekend. And that pattern continues, though by the time we get to Father's Day, we see a deep trough, a positively tilted trough off the coast of California. but strong ridging is going to indicate warm weather and drier weather across the eastern two-thirds of the United States. So let's take a look at our future radar for the entire United States. We see that cluster of storms here in Missouri and Arkansas. As we go through the day, it's going to continue to dissipate, and where it gets the best interaction with the heating of the day and just enough lift in that atmosphere, this is more of a mesoscale system that we're going to be forecasting. So we're going to have to watch for the condition to pop just right, anywhere from the Ohio Valley back across the Central Plains down through Texas into the Northeast. But we're going to watch these storms as they go through the daytime. They're going to feed off that heating and the humidity and the higher dew points. And even out across the plains, we're going to see some of those storms continue and ride that strong lower level jet throughout the night as they coalesce into a line of storm. And then as we go through the day Saturday and we get to the afternoon, we're going to watch that heating, again, popping more storms across the Dakotas, the Ohio Valley, across the South, and into the Northeast. And that pattern is going to continue into Saturday night, into Sunday, as well as we start to see that low making its way out of Saskatchewan into Manitoba. And we have a leading edge of storms making their way through Minnesota, through the Dakotas into northern Nebraska. Let's take a look at this region by region, and we're going to start here in the Central Plains with this system. We're going to watch these storms continue to fizzle out as they make their way through Missouri and Arkansas on our Friday afternoon. But new storms are already firing across parts of Colorado, Nebraska, into Kansas. We even have a couple isolated supercells here across the panhandle of Texas. But watch how we go into the afternoon, evening, and overnight Friday. We still have some discrete cells here in many places, but they're starting to coalesce into a cluster of storms early morning Saturday. So the severe threat, the tornado threat, is definitely going to be lessened, but it could not rule out an isolated tornado overnight Friday into Saturday morning. And by the time we wake up Saturday morning, we're going to see a wide area of heavy rain, intense storms, probably wind and hail are going to be the primary threats, stretching from the panhandle of Oklahoma through Kansas over into Arkansas. And that's going to continue to move to the east. And Saturday, we're going to watch for a refiring, though not as intense as we see on our Friday, but it is Sunday that we're going to continue to watch as we get towards more storms across parts of Texas. And if we look a little bit closer into Texas, we're going to watch these storms again. As I mentioned, they're going to fire Friday night into Saturday morning. We're going to watch them die out as they approach the Dallas area. Here's that line of storms we saw across the plain. And really, Saturday is going to be a quieter day across most of Texas, though we could see an isolated pop-up storm here in the Rio Grande Valley. It is going to be our Sunday that we're going to watch for another cluster of storms to form across North Texas. Through the Ohio Valley, we do have an isolated cluster of cells of storms across southern Illinois that will continue to make its way east on our Friday afternoon, impacting places like Paducah and Evansville. And then we watch that other cluster that's moved out of Missouri and Arkansas make its way in. It could bring some heavier showers from Indianapolis and points south on our Friday evening. So we will continue to watch this. But as I mentioned, it's going to be round after round and a daily chance of storms and heavy rain across this area for the next 48 to 72 hours. Looking into the northeast, we're going to watch the same thing. The afternoon heating is going to generate those heavy storms from New York through the northern New England, even making their way through Massachusetts, but spottier cells across parts of Pennsylvania down into Virginia. As we go overnight Saturday, storms are going to approach the Boston area, but not quite make their way there. But I do think you do have a better chance on Saturday of seeing some rain as we see another line of storms form by Saturday afternoon from Maine down through New Jersey. That's going to make its way through the Boston area. Anywhere along the I-95 corridor is going to be at risk for some severe storms Saturday evening. Looking across the northern plains, it's kind of quiet for our Friday. We do see some storms across Wyoming making their way into Nebraska, into northern Colorado by the time we get to Friday afternoon. Those continue to dive to the south and east, but we are watching that system diving out of Canada. It's bringing showers and storms to Saskatchewan, into Manitoba, even far northeastern Montana. And that makes its way into the Dakotas Saturday afternoon. And then we see that line moving through Minnesota overnight Saturday into Sunday morning. And then we have a second wave of showers making their way through the Dakotas early Sunday morning. In terms of our temperatures across the United States, for our Friday, it is 70s and 80s through the Ohio Valley, 80s and 90s along the south, even 70s up into the northeast, across the northern plains. Out west, you're warm, especially in the deserts where you're approaching well over 100 degrees. And we do see 100 degrees along the parts of southern Texas for our Friday. As we go into our Saturday, temperatures are pretty much a carbon copy of our Friday. We do see a little bit of warming into southern New Mexico where we see triple digits likely. Phoenix, you're approaching 104. Dallas, you're at 91. San Antonio 102, 90s through Florida and up through the Carolinas. As we make our way to Sunday, another repeat. Temperatures aren't really changing much. With that low pressure system, though, that is diving out of Saskatchewan to Manitoba, we are going to see a little bit of cooler weather across parts of North Dakota and northern Minnesota, where highs are going to be held down into the 50s and 60s under that additional cloud cover. But as we go to our Monday, temperatures are quickly rebounding, and that cooler weather moves into Wisconsin and Minnesota with temperatures in the 60s. But that warmth, with that ridging out across the western part of the United States, as we get a trough in the eastern part, we're going to see temperatures approaching 100 to 105 into eastern Washington, eastern Oregon, even northern California. Temperatures are definitely going to be heating up across that part of the country. Now let's take it region by region over the next 48 to 72 hours. Widespread 60s and 70s across the Northeast, especially where you're under that rainfall. Temperatures will be held down, though we're going to see 80s and 90s across Manhattan, down through New Jersey, into places like Philadelphia, down into Richmond, Virginia for your Friday. As we go to our Saturday, a little bit cooler temperatures, but we don't see those 90s as prevalent as we did on our Friday. Temperatures being held down in the 80s. As we go into our Sunday, we're going to start to see that effects of that trough digging into the Great Lakes and Northeast. Temperatures here will be held down into the low 60s, where you have the greatest rainfall occurring. In terms of precipitation over the next 48 to 72 hours, we will see widespread 1 to 2 inches of rain. We could see some isolated 3 to 4 inch amounts across central Pennsylvania as we make our way into Monday morning. Taking a look across the southeast, it's warm temperatures, which is expected this time of the year, 80s and 90s. Not much change for our Saturday, though, where you do see more in the terms of rain and additional cloud cover. Northern Alabama, northern Georgia, across Tennessee, temperatures will be held down in the 70s. As we make our way into our Sunday, 70s and 80s across the Carolinas, 80s through most of the South, 90s across parts of Arkansas and Louisiana, and then 80s to 90s across most of Florida. In terms of precipitation, where you get under the right thunderstorms, the heaviest storms, the downpours, we could see upwards of 2 to 4 inches of rain, but we could see widespread 1 to 2 inches across parts of southern Georgia, through western Tennessee, northern Mississippi, and northern Alabama. Across the south central plains, it is warm, 90s and 100s across Texas. That's not unexpected this time of the year. We're even seeing those 90s and 100s into southern New Mexico, 80s across most of Oklahoma for your Friday. As we go into our Saturday, it is almost a carbon copy, though parts of West Texas, this model wants to take you up to about 110 degrees. So we're going to watch for those upper 100s across this area. Definitely drink plenty of water, stay hydrated, and limit your time outside on Saturday. And as we go into Sunday, that extreme heat does continue across far west Texas into southern New Mexico, with temperatures 105 to 110. Even as we make our way down along into southern Texas, we will see that extreme warm. In terms of our rainfall over the next 48 to 72 hours, where those clusters of storms continue to move out of Colorado, Kansas, through Oklahoma into Arkansas, we could see a pocket of 6 to 8 inches of rain by the time we get to Monday morning. Widespread amounts 2 to 4 inches across parts of Oklahoma and North Texas, making their way through southern Missouri. As we jump to the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley, it is generally slightly below seasonal conditions, temperatures in the 60s and 70s for your Friday. We do see a slight warming into the 70s and low 80s for most areas. That warmth is just out west across the Central Plains. That continues to move towards the Ohio Valley on our Sunday, with temperatures in the 60s and 70s, 80s across Missouri, 60s across the Dakotas into northern Minnesota with the approach of that next weather system. In terms of our rainfall, we're going to see a widespread 1 to 2 inches of rain, basically along and south of a line from I-70 south. We could see some isolated 2 to 3 inches if you get under the right thunderstorms. Across the northern Great Lakes, though, it's generally going to be lighter amounts, generally under a half of an inch by the time we get to Monday morning. Across the northern plains, temperatures are in the 60s and 70s, where we see those cloud cover and those storms on our Friday afternoon. Nebraska, northern Colorado, eastern Wyoming, temperatures here will be held down into the 60s. We are warming slightly on our Saturday, 70s and 80s across most of our area. And then we watch for that cool down across North Dakota and the northern tier of Minnesota, 50s and 60s, whereas south of that, you're in the 70s and 80s as we wait for that system to continue to make its way into the United States. In terms of our rainfall, we're going to see the heaviest amounts of rain across parts of northern Minnesota. Up to an inch is likely, as well as parts of northern Wisconsin. Elsewhere, really less than a quarter of an inch of rain is expected. Across the Four Corners region, we're looking at Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. We're going to see generally seasonal conditions, In those highest of elevations across the Rockies of Colorado, temperatures in the 40s and 50s, slightly below normal, but out in the deserts, it's warming, and it's warming quickly, well into the hundreds for your Friday, and that heat continues as we move into Saturday. And we now start to see the warmer temperatures making their way into western Utah, southern Nevada, Las Vegas. You could be approaching 100 for your Saturday. And as we make our way into Sunday, that heat continues. Parts of Utah into the 90s and low 100s. The deserts, you're going to be 110 plus by the time we get to Sunday. And in terms of our precipitation, we're really not expecting much through our Arizona and New Mexico, even into southern Nevada. It's going to be through Colorado and the panhandle of Oklahoma and Texas where we see the highest of rain. Making our way into California, we're going to see temperatures generally in the 80s and 90s for our Friday, warming into the 90s and 100s across most of California for our Saturday. And as we go into Sunday, that warmth continues as we see the temperatures rising a few degrees warmer. Now along Los Angeles, where you're going to get a little bit of breeze off of the water, temperatures here will be held down into the 70s and 80s, but we're really not expecting much in the way of precipitation over the next 48 to 72 hours. Looking at the Pacific Northwest, it is 80s for most of the areas. Eastern Washington, you could be approaching the 90s. British Columbia, you're in the 50s and 60s for your Friday. As we go to our Saturday, that warmth continues. We're now seeing widespread upper 80s and 90s, Eastern Washington through Oregon into northern Nevada and California. British Columbia, you're now warming into the 60s and 70s, and that continues with 80s now across British Columbia, low to mid 90s, even some upper 90s across Eastern Washington, and that temperature is only going to increase as we go into our Monday. In terms of precipitation, it's going to be far and few between. It's going to be very dry over the next 72 hours across the Pacific Northwest. As we jump up to Alaska for our Friday, we do see area of much colder weather across the northern third of Alaska, the North Slope, with temperatures in the teens and 20s for your Friday. Though as we make our way down towards Anchorage, you're going to be in the 50s for your Friday, as well as Fairbanks. And as we put our map, as we look at our Saturday temperatures, we're going to see slight warming across the North Slope, a little bit cooler weather across the southern coast as we await the next system that's making its way on shore. Temperatures here will be held down to the 40s and 50s. We'll see 60s across the central interior part of Alaska for our Saturday. And as we go into Sunday, slightly cooler weather as that low pressure system continues to dominate most of the southern half of Alaska. And what's going to cause this? We have this area of low pressure that's off the coast of Alaska as we begin our Friday. We're going to watch it make its way towards Kodiak Island, and we're going to see by the time we get to Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning, we're seeing heavy amounts of rain as that low continues to deepen, and you can see these tight pressure lines are going to bring a great amount of wind to Kodiak, to the Kenai Peninsula, and to King Salmon and those areas out along the Aleutian Islands. So we'll continue to watch this. It's going to make its way onshore, and as that colder air from the north interacts with this moisture, we could see some higher elevation snow and mixed precipitation. Snow across the northern third of Alaska with those temperatures in the teens and 20s. And that system is going to quickly move out into the Yukon by the time we get to Sunday morning. But we still have wraparound colder air and precipitation bringing snows to parts of northern Alaska, as well as along the coast in those higher elevations. In terms of precipitation, we could see widespread 2 to 4 inches across the southern coast of Alaska, some isolated 4 to 6 inch amounts across as you make your way down towards Juneau. As we get to the interior, we could see upwards of 1 inch precipitation by the time we get to Monday morning. And as we look at Father's Day and the week beyond, we're going to see temperatures generally above normal for most of the United States, the exception being the Pacific Northwest, where you're going to be sizzling this weekend. It's going to be a complete pattern flip by the time we get to next weekend, as we see that trough beginning to dig across the Pacific Northwest, bringing below normal temperatures to that area. In terms of precipitation, most areas are going to be at normal or slightly above normal chances of precipitation over that 8 to 14 day period. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this video at the Weather Farm. Have a great weekend. Check back again soon for the latest details on weather impacting your backyard, and we will see you soon.